Hello, and welcome to yet another series of Hacking HR November, day 9. Um, so, as we have our guests joining in the studio, would love to know from the audience where all are you joining us from today? And we have our lovely panel with us. Okay, so while our audience is busy on the chat, letting us know where they're joining us from. Uh, our panel today has gathered to talk about leveraging on technology and analytics to expand and augment HR, work, and people capabilities. A quick round of introduction. We're going to be spending 60 seconds with each of the guest panelists today for a quick round of introduction, and then we move into the conversation. Over to Aura.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Ora Hewitt. So excited to be part of this panel with all of you and the audience. And I support people and culture here at La Valley Brensinger Architect as in the position of the director. Thank you.
Awesome. Kiara?
Okay, I didn't want to speak over someone else. Chiara Bersano, I do HR tech, future work, go to market for SAP, SAP SuccessFactors more specifically.
Amazing. Gurvita?
Hello, everyone. I always like joining Hacking HR series because they're always meaningful and they talk about things that matter. So, having said that, I am in a business role right now, not in HR, but I was in HR in my past life, and I work on engagement and program management in an analytics department at Merck. And I'm joining from New Jersey. So great to be here.
Amazing, Gurvita. I see a lot of people from US, and of course we have somebody from Nigeria and Switzerland as well. So it's going to be an interesting group of audience with us today for the conversation. Laura, over to you.
Hi, very happy to be here too. I lead people operations and HR transformation for Genesis, and I'm located in Los Angeles.
Great. And my first question to the panel. How do you see the leaders in organizations assessing the challenges and the VUCA world dynamism in the organization? And what is it that they're doing to solve before jumping into purchasing tech and tools or technology solutions to address the overall organization strategic capabilities? Question is open to all panelists. Anybody may take the lead.
I can start sharing our experience. I always say that it's very important to do an assessment of processes before bringing technology, before evaluating any kind of technology and to bring new tools. You need to evaluate the organization and to evaluate how efficient your processes are. Because in my experience, technology has to be brought as an enabler of processes that were already designed with a purpose and not just as a solution for something. For instance, not just to bring technology as a solution for an inefficiency, because sometimes the inefficiency is in the process itself.
I will go next. Echoing the feedback that Laura shared here, it's so important not only to do the assessment for the reasons that Laura said, but also because it's a learning and experimentation for the organization and those leaders and those teams that are part of there, to know that at times before the assessment is done, there are times where many biases take into place and they think that this already may be the solution or something. And by the end of going through that analysis, organizations, teams, and leaders find out, oh, wow, we haven't considered this. And this is an important part that I think those of us that see in business, obviously HR has part of that analysis, to be on and to ask leaders to pass and to ensure that go thorough to the analysis process. In my side, a lot of times I see that there are so many flashing objects up there in terms of technologies, in terms of potential solutions. And the question that I always go back is like, okay, have you done the analysis? And more important, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And is truly a technology or is a process? Is a potentially training? Because not every technology is gonna solve all the problems of the organization. And also, if it's a technology issue, that we need to get the technology because the assessments have determined that, okay, it's time to change or whatever it is. We need to ensure that the technology that is picked is through the assessment process and that is the correct technology for that specific organization for the situation at the time being.
I don't think that technology ever can solve a problem unless there is an assessment of processes behind. It's simply not possible, because if you actually go and try to pick up any piece of technology and set it up to solve a problem, it's like putting a band-aid over a wound without assessing if the wound need other care, disinfection, and whatever else. And in the end, you will actually have the same problem, just solved, just happening faster, which doesn't sound very good, right? And even more so, I think we actually have to look at these processes as a holistic part of the enterprise and not just as a single piece. If you actually have a problem in acquiring the right people and you want to use analytics to figure out what kind of people you want to acquire faster, well, you should assess why you're losing people, why you need to acquire people faster, how does it work organically? Because otherwise, again, you'll end up with a landscape of technology that goes in all directions. I call it, running faster, but in the wrong direction. Think of when I keep thinking of when I think it was 2014, 2015, Amazon decided to create a recruitment based on AI. You remember that scandal? And what happened is they actually smartly, ideally, took their own successful people as input for the AI to decide who would be successful in the future. Now, unsurprisingly, the successful people in Amazon in the 2010 were white old men. No insult to white old men. I love white old men. They're great people. But it's a very specific set of selection. Well, it came out that the AI was deselecting and deciding that any woman or any profile that would mention women activity, women chess club, women tennis club as inadequate and not sufficient. So you really need to look at the whole picture and the whole problem. Garvita, what is your point of view?
I quite agree with all the points that all three of you raised. I think what I would say is that when it comes to today's world, we have been in a VUCA world for many years now, and we will be. That's our reality. What we need to understand is that everybody is busy, and when they are busy, they don't have enough time to deal with something, they say it's a problem. And a lot of the problems that our leaders say or identify as focus areas are things that they've heard from their teams. Now, this is a clear case where there's two things happening. Number one, we don't take enough time to make everybody understand, what technology they are using, and we don't do that last mile connectivity with our end user. And two, we don't define this problem with enough data, right? I mean, what you can't measure, you cannot solve. I think a classic example is a performance management cycle. Every single year, every single time that you launch that, There's so much, oh my God, all over again. And why are we doing this? And this technology sucks. Why do we have to write all of this? The point is that they don't understand how to deal with it. And that's why they're calling it a problem. And we are not also sharing the success stories and the tips and tricks on how to get done with this thing. So I feel like that busyness and mental occupation, that a lot of time contributes to saying technology is bad, but we really need to get on to what really is going on in that situation so that we can solve for it.
Great insights in there, which made me think. Then, do we also consider the fact that HR leaders and business leaders, along with people, need to relook at their internal competencies and revisit their capabilities to ensure that while technology is leveraged, um, it's also not overshadowing the people experience part of it, where, as you rightly pointed out, in terms of people experience factor somewhere getting diluted every time. So what are some of those capabilities and competencies that HR leaders and business leaders could relook at it to ensure that the human part or the humane part isn't diluted with these technology decisions?
That has been a very long-term battle of mine, to be honest. I think that any HR courses in college, in universities, MBAs should have a part of technology. I don't think nowadays it's possible to conceive HR without technology. Obviously, it's not just having technology understanding, but technology is such a big part. I think that HR people nowadays should have a number of them: understanding of technology, understanding of what change management mean and bring, understanding of some design thinking processes, ideally, to try to guide the enterprise as a whole in the direction of decision making, understanding about what is, and I hate to use the word AI because I think it's overused at this point. I'll rather mention business analytics in general, because it's really about business analytics and how human analytics work with the business analytics, which mean people data understanding. And of course, not everybody can have all this knowledge, but people can pick and choose based on what makes sense for them, what they feel. Just as we had functions before, I think now we should actually start looking at how to divide function in a slightly different way, how to morsel what we actually get to do, as little by little technology takes away the purely administrative part of HR. Finally, we can do something that is more relevant. Let's think about what that more relevant is. Aura, some thoughts? I will stay seeing you.
I would like to also bring up something that that you mentioned in the previous question, that was a holistic approach. And I think that it's important to analyze the employee experience in a holistic way, like end to end, in order to understand what are the points that are really high value. And those are the points that we have to be mindful to create a good experience as we continue to implement technology that automate, and sometimes automation replace human touch. So to your question of how we keep this human touch, even when we bring technology in, I think that we have to identify those points where are points that are very, very important for the employee, where we have the capability to deliver some value to their experience, and then automate everything else, automate and try to bring technology to the parts of the employee experience that they don't have much value, and to be very strategic and to do that analysis that Chiara mentioned previously, holistic end-to-end, not to create solutions that are very targeted.
Or Gurvita?
Yeah, I will say that one of the things that I think is important for this question that you asked regarding the human touch, I do think that as important as it is for HR to continue to be at the front of technology, learning as much as it can of technologies. Also, I think there is time to going back to the basics. And what I mean with that is some of the stuff that we know that are important with technology, and I do agree with Shara and with Laura that the AI term is overused. I think more and more we need ensure that we take the holistic approach, and to be able to do that, we as humans need to continue to evolve our critical thinking abilities, to deepen it, to have more experiences that can help us um, understand things and also assess them thoroughly, not in the rush of things, and not just as one of the panelists here was saying, just putting a bandage, in reality, not solving the problem. Strategic thinking, these are things that we need to continue because if we think strategically, we also need to understand, okay, how the organization operates. What is the process? What are we trying to solve? How can we help people? And I do think that other things like problem solving, HR being champion for people and for the business, because before anything, we are business leaders, right? And I will add that it's important for us to have skills, and understanding of human behavior, and ensure that we are adding value. We can automate things, yes, as assessments happen, and there are opportunities to use technology in areas for the good of the business. We as people, if we have those skills that the panelists here mentioned, plus the ones that I just added, will help us be more proactive and ensure that those interactions are meaningful, and that we are also assessing accordingly.
Great. I think we lost Garvita because of internet issues. We move on to the next one. In terms of data analytics and business analytics, how do we see HR and business leaders leveraging technology to the best, so that the decisions are more data-led and not just quantitative or just qualitative? So there has to be a balance in between the strategic viewpoint and how data can support that strategy in the long term. So any experiences, any case studies that you could share with us today of how business leaders are looking at using business analytics and HR analytics along with technology to move forward?
I could start. I think I lost my camera for the last question, and all that I wanted to add, like I was not going to give a new answer because my colleagues here gave a lot of important information there already. But I think
you can still add. You can still add.
Yeah, one thing that I could say is that when it comes to data and analytics, you know how we say that technology will replace the jobs. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's the people who do not know technology will be replaced by the ones who do. So that's a very important skill and capability for all of us to keep in mind. And I think when it comes to your current question, the idea is to not just have any sort of data or have business analytics to add things to the plate. I think the idea is to have the right things on your plate. And for that, you need to think of analytics as something which is generating information, and information that is giving you insights. And I want to say that, having had some experience in this field, do not depend on data to give people insights directly. You have to facilitate it and point out the right analysis and insights that come from each set of data, rather than depending on people to derive it themselves. Because, like I think I was talking about earlier, human mind is very experience oriented. If I have had a bad experience with a travel booking, whatever data you show me about that website, I will say, oh, I don't think that works. So really breaking it down into meaningful insights and going when it comes to, our HR processes, what really do we mean? For example, time to hire, think about that as a case study. Nobody has perfected it, right? All of us have been trying for ages and we continue to work on it because people always say we don't get the right people in the right time. So really breaking it down into different steps, what Chiara mentioned some time back about what's the process, and like we spoke earlier, breaking it down and seeing what really is working or not working, what's the time we are spending in each area, and because of that, where is the actual lag happening? And there are times we have to be very brave and honest to say that now that our insights are saying that probably there's a problem with talent acquisition, we should be brave enough to accept it. Probably there's a point, that our hiring managers take a long time to shortlist candidates or to or scheduling interviews. We should be honest and transparent to say that there is. I think more than half of the time, we do not want to raise insights which will point finger at us. And that should not be the idea. We should definitely say that, there's a problem we are trying to solve with business analytics. And the core belief is that we need to be transparent and work as one team to be able to solve those problems that the analytics come up with. So I think that's something I would say. I'll pass on to Laura.
I agree with Garvita in so many points, but I think that there are a couple of things that in my experience are important. And one is to define the problem, because sometimes organizations tend to create or make available analytics with a lot of information to people that don't know how to interpret, how to read it. So you put a lot of information in front of people that actually, is not very useful because people don't know how to use that information to answer for the problems that they have. So I think that is a little bit two things. One is to define the problem. That is something that I think that Ora mentioned before, to actually define the problem and to understand why we are using this information that we have in front of us. And the second one is, it's not just about making data available to people, but also you have to have other actions like explaining people how to interpret that data, what is, or how to create stories with that data, or how to connect the data that they have available now to the problems that they have, and how to use, actually, I think that Ora mentioned critical thinking. And it's a combined effort. It's not just making analytics available to people and putting more information in the table of leaders and decision makers, that sometimes putting too much information without a context, it just makes everything very slow, and it doesn't actually solve for anything.
I would like to also address an elephant in the room that is often around. Actually, it's, in my experience, has always been around. When we talk about analytics, we're talking about organized information. Information is, in fact, simply organized data. But that data, in most cases, in most enterprises, is never clean. And when you grab sets of data that are partial, that are duplicated, that are incorrect, and you try to drag information out of that, and you try to create analytics, or even worse, artificial intelligence out of that, you actually are going to replicate faster the problem that you already have. I keep preaching every time before getting into a business analytics project, before trying to analyze how people data should be, how people information should be organized, take a deep look at what and how clean is your data. And if you need to, go through a process of cleaning it. It sounds obvious, but that's where project failed. Sounds, I know, That's my heart speaking there.
It's true.
But beyond that, I cannot agree more. Garvita has had some fabulous points there, and we need to actually assess what is happening and make sure that we are taking the right pieces. Remembering that it is a process, in fact, we go from data into information, from information to processes, from processes into, actually, I'm getting the wrong order, processes to data, data to information, information to business analytics of whatever form they are. And I hate to separate people analytics from business analytics. They should be considered one and alone. Ora, you're the last one speaking on this.
Hard to follow after all the insights that all of you, Garvita, Laura, and Shara, shared here. I do think that by reviewing the data specifically and ensuring that we understand not only that is clean data, because they not going to repeat the issues that Shara mentioned. Also ensuring what Laura said here, that we are using critical thinking and that we are asking, obviously, what is the problem first. And what Garvita said here, that we need to ensure that we understand what is for the holistic part of the problem. It will save time and effort at the end and a lot of headaches, because again, if it's not done through the analysis and using critical thinking and ensuring that we know what is the end result of what we're looking to achieve, it's gonna be very hard to get there. So those are my 2 cents.
Awesome. So very good insights in terms of business analytics and HR analytics. And I was thinking in that process when everyone was sharing their experiences, a lot of times organizations want to fall back on prescriptive or descriptive data rather than going to futuristic or probabilistic data. So how do you see, or what do you suggest to the organization leaders for moving away from prescriptive and descriptive data to predictive or forecasting data, and utilize that at strategic level, operational level, and tactical level, rather than just limiting themselves either to strategic or transactional level?
I will add something. I do think that in business analytics, there is a place for all 4 parts of them. It all starts obviously with the data, and it also starts on one, how clean it is, how usable it is, because if now we have to even go, I'm not saying 2 steps backwards, we actually have to go like 3 steps backwards to try to clean the data and ensure that we have actual information that can be usable. And I do think that in terms, depending on where the business is and depending on what a specific process is happening, I think descriptive analytics have a place for it. Diagnostic have a place for it, because there are things in business that you have to diagnose, and it's like a process of all of them working at the same time, depending on what is happening. Prescriptive have a place, and also predictive, but I do think the predictability of the business analytics, that one, we need to be careful with that to ensure that what we are assessing is truly, and not like in the case, a great example that Shara shared here. There are parts of data that are in organization that are historical data, and some of them are not complete data. So if we use that data in the model to actually try to predict something in the future, it's gonna give us so a part of what that predictive can be, but it's not full of what it can be if we will have the full data to begin with.
Yeah, I would like to add, I completely agree about the quality of the quality of the data. It's like the one of the most important things. But the other thing is, we live we are living right now in a world that it's pretty unpredictable. And there are a lot of variables that, we have to be careful with predictive models, because in the unpredictability that we are living right now, and how we tell, to the previous question, how we tell those stories, right, about the future. I think that there are two things in predictive. One is the quality of the data that Ora already mentioned, and the other is to understand that that we live in a world that is very different, very fast. So I think that that's something to have in mind.
Thank you. Gurvita?
I think I would like to take a bit of a different take to this. The type of analysis you are doing is semantics. It's like saying that I have to reach a destination. Google Maps will show me 3 ways to go there, right? The important part here is, are you working as a true consultant and partner to understand what is that destination and why is that needed, so that you can use the right tool to help solve the problem. And I feel like it's very easy to get deep into the different solutions and be, into it so deep that you spend a lot of time and you do not see, what that's doing to the overall solution. And that's why I feel like, there's different solutions possible, and end of day, that's what you want to bring to your client organization. But are you truly that partner who's able to give them those 3 solutions and ask them for what they need out of them, show them the pros and cons? That's what matters. I mean, it's not like there's a blanket situation in which anyone will fit in. For example, the problem of attrition. There is a lot of meaning in using historical data and understanding the problems. And equally, there's a lot of value in understanding using predictive analysis to try and figure out what's going to happen in future as well. And that you incorporate all of that to figure out a holistic workforce planning, right? So it's not like a one solution will fit all the problems, but you have to really be that partner who goes to the end user and helps them understand, what are the variety of solutions possible, what are the pros and cons, and what you feel will help them with their situation, but give them the decision. They should choose what works best, and not getting too lost in creating that solution. That's what we have to understand. We have to have that agile mindset ourselves, where we make our client a partner at every step of the solution. We show them what's going on and allow them to make a decision and be open to make the change. Chiara, over to you.
I think it makes completely sense what you're saying, and that's a great point. It reminds me, a few years ago, I was talking, I believe, with Genentech. And there was one of the first analytics project that the enterprise was addressing. And the problem they were facing, like many other organizations, is the business leaders often don't see the value. There's a project, fantastic, but what is it going to do for me? What choices are going to be coming from me? So at the time, I remember the gentleman who did that was absolutely brilliant. He actually put together a very skeleton team and dug into data in depth. Not trying to identify, a bit like Gurvita was mentioning, not spending too much time on it, but went on to creating an easy set of data to sell to the business leaders how valuable that could be to them. Because once they actually started seeing that the data they were getting out of that was leverageable in their day-to-day life, it immediately won the time to create the next set and to create the actual data sets and to create the actual data analytics that would help further. And he started immediately, and the team started growing and started getting traction and started actually getting calls from all sides of the business, not just HR, saying, can you get me some data on people in this area because there is a problem? But the first step was to sell the actual value internally, taking very simple steps, not trying to look at I'm flying to New York, but trying to look, okay, how do I get to the airport? To take Garvit example on Google Maps. Laura, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I will always, say that context is so important. And I think that it's very important what you say about understanding one. I think that some of you mentioned already, understanding one, what is the problem? What we are trying to figure out, instead of just, creating a model or using predictive analytics just to say, okay, what can happen? Well, what we do want to happen, and how we use and how we leverage analytics to understand how to make it there. So I couldn't agree more about, understanding the context and understanding why we are using data, actually.
Awesome. My next question for the panel. What are some of the HR best practices that are changing with the new technology being launched every now and then, and organizations struggling and making every effort to adapt to the new technologies? Historically seen, if one organization, for example, adopts ChatGPT to support the transactional or the operational work of HR, others will follow the suit and just copy paste, whether it really makes any sense for them to do it, or they should use ChatGPT in a different context for their organization experience. I think that is something which is not leveraged well. So some of the HR practices that are changing with new technology coming in, your experiences or the trends that you've seen around you.
Something that I have seen is people come to the work environment with different expectations. So when I'm talking for my generation, back in the 90s, we were working on our expectations of our organization and our expectations of our employee experience was extremely different from the expectation that the new generations are bringing to the workplace. So that's changing the way that HR is thinking about technology, because we have to offer an experience that is more similar to Netflix, is more similar to applications that you have for everything in your phone. For instance, right now, being able to offer an application to an employee to do transactional work in their phone, it's critical. The opportunity, something that is right now is super important, is to be able to offer the employees training in their phones, that they don't have to go into a computer. Most of the work that employees are doing it's work that they do in their phones. So I think that it's the expectations that the new generations are bringing in terms of service and in terms of experience, that everything has to be seamless, everything has to be, a great experience. It has to be something that it doesn't require 20 different clicks to arrive to, to finalize a transaction. And I think that is changing, in my experience, how HR is thinking and designing and bringing in technology.
I think I have had several roles in the area of transformation, and what I've seen as a big change and best practice being implemented now everywhere is You don't have to sell HR the idea of great technology and great people experience. Everybody knows it's important. And if they don't give it the right importance and the right budget, I must add, it will come back to bite them later. So everybody has understood that. However, there are certain things which, we are still evolving and learning, and it's a journey, right? So, for example, another practice is when you have a technology implementation, don't try to do it yourself. Get the people who know it, who have had experience in it, and who will tell you what could be a bump in the road for you to do it for you. And sometimes these people belong to another consulting organization, another technical organization, or they could be just, people in your own organization who could do gigs or be, that expert partner for you. So that's another best practice that has started happening, which we did not see earlier in the area of technology. I think one more, which I think is coming up, which we will see happening soon enough, is when it comes to our business analytics groups. And I know Chiara mentioned that they are not separate. Analytics is one, and it is an integrated organization. However, in any large organization, we will see that each department has their own flavor and their own culture of doing things. So with that in mind, I think business analytics is agile in a way that will be a best practice for HR analytics. For example, if you have a large project that is your need of the hour, you have to prioritize and you have to, take resources from elsewhere and attach here, right? We say that we are also agile in HR, but do we really take resources from another project and put them elsewhere, whatever is the priority? I don't think we holistically and empirically do that right now. And it's a best practice that is going to be seen in the times to come, where we will say what needs to be done requires something else to be paused, and we should be okay with that. Aura, over to you.
There are a couple of things, great insights. So one thing that I see from time to time is that in terms of practices, I do not think that necessarily what works for one organization is going to work for the next one. And this applies pretty much to everything, including like culture, including your D&I statement, what you're doing. Every organization is different. Every organization have different goals, objectives, things they want to do. At the same time, these approaches are same. It's different. It's experimental. There are opportunities within, but like copying and paste, not necessarily is gonna help you as an organization. So that's pretty much the bottom line. And the second point I wanted to add is that when these type of transformations are happening, it's important to understand the process that organizations currently have and what are opportunities within that to enhance it. And it goes back to, we heard this consistently, understanding the audience, and this tied to what Garvita, Laura say, specifically answering this question, and Chiara shared a little bit of this previously, how it's important to understand the holistic situation and what we are trying to solve to ensure that we can, if it's an opportunity to enhance the process and making it better, go for it, but base it on your organization, not necessarily what is happening somewhere else.
Awesome. Chiara.
Well, I was just adding to what Aura said, because different organizations have, even within the same organization, from today till next month, you may see that the priority shifts. And if you take two different organizations, even in the same industry, even in the same geography, the priority might be different, are usually very different. The business priority, particularly, one company may be launching new product and the other one may be focused on opening up new markets. And automatically, that simple difference will completely shift the level of priorities. So going back to what Natasha asked earlier, can you take what somebody else did and do a plugin? No. Do you need to spend month and month agonizing over it? Not even. But you have to sit back and ask pragmatically yourself and your business leaders, what are we trying to address? Is that really the real problem? And most of the time I try to push companies to do some kind of design thinking assessment, not because design thinking is the solution to the whole world, but because it's a very commonsensical way to get everybody around the table to assess what the real problem behind. You're probably not trying to solve the problem of why don't you have enough candidates. You're probably trying to solve how can you improve the whole candidate experience, if not even more, the whole recruiting approach, because one doesn't go without the other. So we're back to holistics, I'm afraid.
Love it. Okay, looks like we're inching closer to the wrap time for the session. I would love to spend next approximately 10 minutes with the panel to understand, how do you see artificial intelligence and virtual reality helping the organizations move forward in the journey of leveraging technology and analytics for people capabilities?
I can talk about my experience with artificial intelligence and the deployment of artificial intelligence in organizations, and it's you have to have, again, to Chiara's point, a holistic approach, and to understand that you have to train the organization first in the use of artificial intelligence. It sounds like it's just plug and play, and it is not. Even systems and technology that is very intuitive and very user-friendly and integrates artificial intelligence in a way that it looks seamless, you have to train the organization on how to interpret the data that artificial intelligence is giving them. I don't remember who brought I think that was Chiara, the example of Google and how they train artificial intelligence in a way that was detrimental for the organization at the end. It's something that is super important, is for people to understand that whatever information artificial intelligence brings you is just a piece of information. It's not a decision, and it's not something that is going to replace human judgment. And in my experience, artificial intelligence is an extremely powerful and useful tool in combination with human judgment. You have to have the human the human part of the equation in the decisions that we make as an organization still. And I think that that's one of the most important things as you deploy artificial intelligence, for the people to understand that that doesn't replace humans, and that doesn't replace human thinking and critical thinking. So in my experience, that's one of the most important things for AI right now.
I think that's a critical piece indeed, Laura. You know, it brings to memory there were recently some article published by Microsoft on Excel adoption. When Excel came out, let's all remember what the reaction was in the world. Let's all of us who actually were in business at the time remember. And the assessment where people were shocked, saying, oh my God, Excel, this is going to eliminate so many jobs. Did it? No, it didn't. Some people changed jobs. Some people had to align and learn how to use Excel. But in fact, it created about 20% more jobs because analysis became possible. It's not because it was not relevant before, but before it was simply not possible. It was simply not. But once it became possible, we could actually learn from an Excel tool with formulas that actually made easier comparing. And the same thing is going to happen with AI. It's not AI is going to displace jobs. Actually, it's probably going to create some simply because it's going to add additional evaluation, additional understanding, and we'll know in what direction to go, or we'll know better, hopefully. Garvita, I know you'll have a ton to say on that.
I do. I think this is a topic that keeps on coming everywhere. There is no place where you can say technology or analytics and not have the word AI come in. I do think that it's time we stop getting scared of this term and start thinking about it as to what it really means. Think about an example of somebody traveling to a foreign country where they don't understand the language, they don't understand the context, and they just use the translator on their phone, or they use the maps on their phone to go where they want to go. They need something to help them. That classic example of a car reaching somewhere which goes nowhere because nobody understood where they were going. I think it's a solution, it's a tool to be used. And the classic case is when you are thinking about in HR how to get away from transactional work in order to move to strategic work, every support that you get is useful. So, from that question mark on your portal where you can say, what's the holiday list like? And you don't need to answer it. A tool will answer it for you. And because it's AI, they will also ask questions which are related to it. So do you want to know what are the benefits that you have for travel? Do you want to know what are some of the things that you can plan with this in whatever country you are in because you're looking for a holiday list? So those are the ways in which that tool will help rather than, hamper something. Yes, there will be situations where the tool will be unsuccessful because, like Laura said, human impact cannot be, discounted anywhere. The human intelligence has to be supreme because you understand the context, and the context is the king or queen. But when it comes to AI, we have to start implementing it, adopting it, and using it to its best possible ability so that we are able to reduce our time being spent on transactional work and move to work which allows us to give more value to our clients. With that, I give it to Aura.
Thank you, Garvita. Great insights, all of you, Chiara, Laura, and Garvita. The one thing that I will add is that it's as we are implementing this tool, it goes back to ensure that what AI is giving us is actual reality of stuff, and not that it's putting other stuff that it can be like on the web. So it's important to ensure that it's verified, and then the information is actual. So that ties back to we as human doing our due diligence or checking that and getting what artificial intelligence is giving us just as a set of information. We still need to deploy our problem solving skills, right? AI is not going to do everything for us. So you need to continue to develop those, need to continue to develop critical thinking, right? And that will move us to the next step, that is strategic thinking. And I do see that also as part of when we are doing these implementations, is very important, the part that my colleagues here share. The emphasis on not only developing the training, pausing and allowing employees and those who are going to be using technologies or anything in the organization regarding training to be able to not only learn it, but experiment it and taking the time to use it.
Amazing. So before we wrap up, a quick rapid fire. That's been my signature with all of you always. Your word of advice to the audience of how can business leaders do their strategy differently or their thinking differently when they're looking at leveraging technology and analytics for people experience in HR. Quick rapid round.
I think the one thing that I would say we can do as professionals, both in business as well as in HR, is we have to stop getting scared of all the new terms and all the new tools that we keep on hearing. Instead of that, we can understand them as possible solutions and use the experts who know them in order to create that for us. That's the whole point of, an economy and a world where we are all connected. We can see the skills and we know about different tools. So use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I would like to highlight something that we mentioned. So most of us mentioned there is a holistic approach to review, to have a holistic analysis of what we are trying to solve first. And also holistic in the sense that we have to be mindful to train the organization to use new technology. Sometimes we deploy technology without training the organization, not only in the technology itself, which is relatively easy, but also in what it means, the data that now is available to people. And that makes things more complicated instead of solving something. So I think that having a holistic approach end-to-end, analyzing first what's the problem and putting a focus on change management and how this change is going to impact the organization is important.
I think that I would bring in the concept of focusing on the real problem. Find what is the real problem. Most of change management processes I know mention the burning bridge. Let's forget the burning bridge for a second. Of course, we need to know it is there. We need to remember that there are timelines and so on. But the burning bridge will force us to focus often on the wrong problem, on the immediate problem to solve, while the reason it exists are probably a few steps back, and we need to go back to that to fix something. So let's do that kind of homework. That may be on processes, that may be on talking to business, to the business leaders, and not just to the owner of the specific little piece that needs fixing.
Aura.
Echoing what I'll say here, first assess. I do think the part of assessment is super important, and know what is the holistic situation of the organization and what are we trying to solve. Because if we don't know that, it's gonna be very hard to get anywhere. You can have greatest technology, you may have the most amazing team, but if you don't know what you're solving for, it's like, what are we gonna do? So I think that that ties to taking the pausing, and don't let the flashy or the what Chara was referring, like the burning bridge, the immediate need. What is the real root cause of the issue? And then from there, then we can take the necessary steps to just solve it together.
Awesome. Brings us to a wonderful wrap up for this panel conversation. Audience can stay tuned. Our next upcoming session is creating effective strategies for employee engagement and retention in a highly volatile talent marketplace. A big shout and thanks to all our panelists. Thank you so much for taking our time and sharing your thoughts and views on this topic. And we sign off till we meet again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
everyone, and good whatever wonderful moment of this day you are enjoying on your time zones. It is so wonderful to be back facilitating Hacking HR panels. Haven't had one of these in about 2 weeks, and I was starting to feel Hacking HR withdrawal symptoms. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour or so. I hope that you came here to share insights, to listen to a great conversation. Welcome if you just jumped on the link. Welcome back if you stayed on from the previous amazing conversation. And just a quick reminder, the topic is effective strategies for employee engagement and retention, especially within a highly volatile talent marketplace. Now, we have our tech whisperer extraordinaire with us, Jessa. She's working her magic backstage, and I will ask her help with bringing our amazing lineup of speakers on the screen. And while they get used to seeing their faces in the little LinkedIn Live boxes, I will continue to welcome everybody. And 2 quick asks for help. 1, do drop us a short note. Let us know where in the world you're listening or watching us from, because that will first and foremost put our minds at rest that we are not stuck in some LinkedIn Live loop somewhere. So there's actually a lot of you out there curious. And second, it's always so wonderful to travel around the world through the audience. And please do consider the comments as your own space for conversation. Consider the questions that we bring up in the panel just as much yours as it is our speakers. Drop us your insights, your ideas. Drop any kind of resource on the topic that you have found helpful and meaningful, because that will definitely help us grow and support this community. Now, enough of the intro blabathon, because the Hacking HR hours are shorter than regular hours, and let's make most of our time. What I will do, I will start easy. So I will get the eMic around on the screen clockwise, and I will ask, just shortly, kindly introduce yourselves. And also, I was so curious. Enrique always gifts us with mouthful panel titles. So from the creating effective strategies for employee engagement and retention in a highly volatile talent marketplace, I'm curious, what caught your attention? And you said, oh, I'm going to be there for that conversation. So, Saris, it's so good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. It's actually Karis, Karis Cook. I'm chief, everybody always gets it wrong, it's all right. Chief People Officer at a health tech company called Swift Medical. I have over 2 decades of strategic people leadership spanning diverse industries, specializing really in high growth scaling organizations and working directly with CEOs and founders. Have a track record of crafting award-winning, inclusive, high levels of engagement in organizations relevant to this conversation, and really nurturing those value-based cultures. Like what attracted me, everything that we've been going through in the tech industry over the last couple of years is exactly this topic. So I just have such a wealth of experience over the last couple of years in dragging an organization through it feels like the last couple of years that I couldn't not be here.
Thank you so very much. And also thank you for so graciously addressing the Starbucks moment. And I can totally feel your pain. I have my name mispronounced and misspelled so often, I sometimes doubt that I do it correctly myself. So thank you, Carrie. It's good to have you here. Alicia, hello.
Hi, yes, and it is Alicia. That's great. You're making up for it. So my name is Alicia Gill, and I have been in the human capital space for a while. I'm a former economist and most recently former chief people officer. And now I've started my own business. And it's because I'm deeply committed to making sure that employees have the experience they deserve, right? Ultimately, this is rooted in respect. And we believe really, really strongly that to get fulfillment, to be fulfilled in your work, to be productive in your work, you have to follow your own personal North Star. And nobody can tell you what that is. You have to know it for yourself. But I do support companies and their retention of critical talent. And the way that you do that is acknowledging those North Stars and giving them an individualized employee experience. So, so when I saw this topic come up, I said, this is exactly in my wheelhouse, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so very much. Angela, it's so good to see you. It's been a while.
I know, Manila. It's always such a pleasure to join you on these panels. Thank you. Hi, I'm Angela. I've got, like my other colleagues, 20 years of experience focused on talent management. So architecting and implementing programs across every aspect of the talent lifecycle: attraction, learning and growth, culture engagement, performance management, the whole gamut. And I'm really obsessed, is really the best word I can come up with employee engagement and the employee experience. And because of that, I now partner externally with organizations. I come alongside of them to help them shape their talent strategy, because I have found it is the single biggest multiplier to driving organizational performance, bigger than anything else we can come up with. And I'm also an adjunct faculty member in a master's HR program. I teach talent management and organizational design. And what attracted me to this topic is the combination of the employee engagement topic, which, as I said, is my personal obsession. So I always love talking about that, but combined with the volatile market. Because so often, I think people think employee experience only happens in good times. And so I was really excited to be able to come onto this panel and be able to talk about why and how it not only also makes sense in volatile times, but maybe even more so.
Thank you so very much. And we have Jason in the house today.
Hey everyone, Jason coming from Rutgers University today. I'm at I got a little guest office here, and I'm on a mobile phone, so bear with me please, but doing a little give back event for future HR leaders with the Masters in undergraduate program here with other HR leaders from the New Jersey area, the HR Leadership Council. But I'm so happy to be here. I've been over 20 years of HR as well, and labor relations as well, and spent most of my career dealing in the aspect of talent management and working within the confines of love and belonging when you're looking at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I think that's where most HR leaders typically like to work in trying to foster the human basic capital need of that love and belonging. And that ties back to this topic today of how, folks, especially in a volatile market, need to have that sense of connection, that sense of camaraderie, friendship, and that sense of belonging of their colleagues, peers, and their connection to their company, in order to stay engaged and retained, and obviously to foster their own future development. So thank you for having me today, and looking forward to it.
Thank you. And last but not least, hi Lisa, it's so good. You make this panel perfect. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you as well, and thanks for letting me come back. It's always nice when you let me come back a second time. So I am the Chief People Officer at Perceptyx, and unlike the rest of my panelists here, I haven't spent the past 20 plus years in HR. I've spent the past 25 years in HR tech, predominantly selling to CHROs and building product for CHROs at Ceridian, UKG, and other organizations. And it wasn't until, about 10 years ago, I made the leap into HR. And honestly, I did it because I was so frustrated in watching how outdated and archaic a lot of HR departments were as I was selling into them and building product for them. They were always the last to evolve, the last to really be provocative and innovative. And I thought this was my chance to radically transform that and change the way we think about things. I'm passionate about this because the company I work for does exactly this. Perceptyx is actually focused entirely on discovering insights within organizations to help drive meaningful action that ultimately improves business outcomes. So I get to work for a company that focuses on continuous listening, continuous behavior change, and driving business outcomes on a daily basis. And we, of course, drink our own champagne. So it's fun to be in the people leader seat in an organization that has such a profound impact on the people experience in companies all over the globe.
This conversation will definitely feel like sunshine, and I desperately need it in this gloomy Swiss November. Now, most of you know this about me. I'm a journalist by trade. I'm a change manager by choice. And one thing that I learned pretty much the hard way is at the beginning of every conversation, make sure that we clarify what we mean by the words that we use. So before we dive very, very deeply into the topic, let's spend a few minutes and really unpacking what do we mean by employee engagement? What do we mean by retention? And also there are extra points available if we can touch on the chicken and egg dilemma, which is first and how these two nurture each other. And I will just leave this conversation there on the stage, and let's see who practiced for the unmuting competition. Who wants to start us off? Caris.
I'm happy to start. So I really almost define it as capturing people's attention, which is really hard to do in today's just environment, because there's so much mental load on everyone. Like everybody's carrying around there's a massive number of distractions in the world, and you have like these, only moments to capture attention. So it's keeping the attention on the work, but not only on it, but connected to the deeper purpose of why they're doing the work, and then creating that environment where they actually want to be. So psychologically safe environments in order to really elicit the best work that people can provide. And it's really essential to retention, because if you don't feel connected to an organization and the work that you're doing, there's not anything that's really keeping you in an organization, especially when you're remote and you have less of the day-to-day face-to-face interactions with people in general. So you're not as physically connected to an organization. So having that deeper connection to a purpose, really important for that retention.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add again, like I mentioned about that whole love of belonging and the connection, it's the emotional connection, it's the motivational connection, it's their involvement through programs, resource groups that the company offers. But again, it goes back to their believing in the mission, vision, and values of the corporation, their commitment of what they feel that they're giving their time to each and every day, what's their fit in the organization in their specific roles. That gauges their level of engagement. The chicken or the egg answer, my answer would be the engagement obviously comes before the egg of retention, because the retention is the after effect of that. If you're doing the things up front through engagement, you're preventing the issue of turnover and retention. So again, in a volatile market, you want to practice and focus on the engagement of an associate up front, while from a proactive standpoint. But there is definitely some challenges to that when you work in a volatile market of who are who's getting the most out of the company, and who's the company leaning on most in a volatile market that can cause burnout, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more later. And I'll yield some time to my other panelists here.
Where do we go next? Alicia.
Yeah, so I'll take it the other way around. So I would say employee retention is the state of having not left your organization, right? This is a measure. You're still there. So eventually you will attrit, because unless you plan on retiring from the organization you're working for, at some point you will be an attrit, whether of your own volition or sometimes not of your own volition. But the retention is the state of still being there. But employee engagement is a real contributor as to whether or not you make the decision to continue to work there, right? So employee engagement implies it has a positive connotation. And so it's all around the connection, the positive connection that you feel to the organization, the degree of belonging has been discussed, whether or not the organization is meeting your needs, is living up to the explicit or implicit promise they made of what your experience was going to be. It's the combination of all those things. And if those things aren't being met, you're not having a highly engaged person, you're having a poorly engaged person, and that person is going to have to make the decision as to whether or not it's a sustainable situation for them. If the pros outweigh the cons, and then they make a decision as to whether or not they will become part of the attrition number in that category. But I do think engagement is a really broad way of talking about how people are positively or not disposed to the experience that they are having of the organization they work for.
And I just want to add to that, Alicia. I think that was a really important point that retention isn't always, it's related to engagement, but not always, because just because I'm disengaged doesn't mean I will leave. And in fact, that's worse. If I'm psychologically disengaged, and I have that new term that we had, what was it, in 2021 or 2022, the quiet quitting term. I haven't heard that much about it this year, but that's really what that was. It was really just a fancy way to say I'm disengaged, but I'm still here. And that's actually worse than somebody who just chooses to leave, because now they are psychologically demotivated from the organization. They are often taking people down with them, and they are certainly not high performers and highly productive because they aren't engaged, but they have still stayed with you. And you actually are in a conundrum because they're not able to be replaced because of that. And so I do think we need to understand the relationship between the two, but definitely define retention as there's a positive retention and potentially even a negative retention as well.
Angela, I want to add on to that. We used to always, back in my day, call that like quitting and staying, right? Like, and then we gave it an actual term, which that term's probably changed even now, 2 years later, right? There's the opposite of this, though, that we have to look at, which is just because a person is highly engaged doesn't mean they're not going to be part of the attrition, right? Like, people are not made to stay at roles and organizations for 5, 10, 15 years anymore. And I think that is a challenge that I personally see with CHROs that I'm connected to, is that they expect that because people are highly engaged, they're going to have long-term careers with their organization. And that's just not how people are built today. If you look at the average tenure of most people, it's under 3 years. I mean, people take a job for a very specific period of time to do a very specific thing and expect to move on. So retention, attrition, and engagement are not mutually exclusive anymore. There's definitely indicators there, but I think we've got to be cautious to assume that because we have a highly engaged workforce, we're going to naturally have, a higher retention and lower attrition number. That's not the case today with the behaviors of new generations coming into the workforce, and frankly, what their expectations are and their ability to say, hey, I got something better over here. It doesn't mean I don't love what I have here, but this just looks better. So I'm going to go do it because I can and I want to. Mm-hmm. So I just think we've got to balance both, right? Because they're both challenges that HR and leaders are facing. And I think that's the other thing we have to focus on is engagement is not HR's problem. It is not HR's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. And too many organizations approach this that somehow the HR team is responsible for engagement. We're not. Every person is responsible for it.
Mm. I love how many conversation hooks were dropped in this round of answers, and the stack of mental Post-its is growing in my mind. Now, Angela, I love the point that you made that employee engagement, we tend to associate employee engagement and retention to good times. And since it was your conversation, Candy, I will ask you to be the pioneer on this one. And as we look at everything that we've been navigating over the past 2-3 years, mm-hmm. We look, into a highly volatile talent marketplace going into the future. What are some of the trends, or what are some of the key challenges, but equally opportunities that we see moving forward?
Yeah, I think when we look at this kind of volatile market, and I do have to pause for a moment and say I like that word, because it's not necessarily that it's a challenging environment. It might be, it may not necessarily be a downturn for every part, every industry, but it might be. But volatile kind of captures that there's just a lot going on. And I think one of the things that we need to realize that engagement brings, the typical things we talk about, what we just did is retention and productivity and some of that stickiness. But there's other things that retention brings that I think becomes so incredibly valuable in these kind of volatile markets. And one of those is that engaged people tend to be more resilient. They tend to be more able to deal with uncertainty and stress and change because it's a psychological connection that they have. And that is exactly what we need when we have a volatile environment. So we definitely really want to seek out that engagement, and not just in the good times, but in the times where we need people who can cope with things. We need people who can put up with change that we may not always be able to pause and explain, but they will trust because they are engaged. And so that is one of the reasons why I think it's so important to be able to focus even more on engagement in these kinds of times. And I think you asked me for maybe some ideas. Was that the other part of the question?
Yeah.
So I think the other thing about these kind of volatile environments is people don't want to spend a lot, and they don't want to put a lot into long-term investments because you don't know where things are going in a volatile environment. And sometimes engagement gets this rap that it's expensive and that it's long. And it doesn't have to be. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Things like telling people that they matter, giving people kind of those hooks for community, those things don't have to cost anything and will reap you a huge amount of benefit in terms of those levels of engagement. So I think we could maybe talk about what those could look like and how you can draw engagement out of somebody without some big engagement program. You can't really do engagement, to Lisa's point. We can bring people into a belonging, into a community, into making an impact on the organization, into trusting. We've lost a lot of trust these last couple of years between employees and employers. Those are the things we can focus on, and then engagement becomes the outcome of those things instead of trying to do engagement.
Angela, I could not agree more with what you just said about not having to spend a lot of money, right, on this, because when we look at employees, they are applying new pressures to us as organizations, right, to prioritize their well-being, to provide greater flexibility in their work, right? Like work is no longer where you go. Work is work is no longer what you do. It's or where you go. It's what you do, right? And it's necessary for us to think about how do we provide greater well-being. That doesn't mean we have to go invest in a lot of expensive benefits. It's creating greater flexibility, getting more provocative with our time away from work programs, meeting people at the age and stage of their life and where they're at, and not just following the norms, right? Helping people see a path forward for their own growth. Those aren't things that require us to go out and purchase systems. Yes, there's systems out there that can help with well-being or with career growth and opportunity, learning, et cetera. But a lot of that can just be done internally by having effective leaders and having the opportunity for people to just see the different areas that they can invest in themselves through experiences, exposure, et cetera. It doesn't have to be an expensive lift. And I think that's where some HR leaders and people leaders get stuck, is they think, well, I don't have the funds to do this. I don't have the money to invest in this. You can invest your time, and you can invest your feedback, and invest, your perspective with people. And a lot of that's really all they're looking for, is for you to understand where they're at and to give them greater flexibility, or to demonstrate that, Jason, you mentioned burnout, being more focused on helping people find fluidity between work and life, when work and life are sometimes at the kitchen table. Those things are inexpensive, and we actually will get the same value out of them, probably more than if we go drop an extensive amount of money on a system or a platform that doesn't end up getting utilized the way that we desire or expect it to.
Alicia, I see you unmuted, please.
Yeah, I want to jump in on that one. I think that it's true. It's very easy, especially for CHROs, to be thinking of the programmatic response, right? What is the enterprise-wide thing that we can do? And that could be a system, it could be a tool, it could be a program, but that's not necessarily what's needed. Maybe, right? I think it's really important for companies to take it out of the space of HR and really instill the skills in our managers to understand the types of experiences their specific employees expect. Not all employees are the same, right? Some people are looking for flexibility, some people are not. Some people want to be in the office, some people don't. Some people don't want to be promoted, they just want a salary increase. Some people don't want anything other than a mentor, right? Like, and so taking a tailored approach that doesn't cost money, maybe you create the conditions to support managers to take an individualized approach to what they do. But that's a way to get to high impact while making your leaders better leaders, which we want to do, and actually not having to spend money, and then having more highly engaged people who, you know, as people have said, is not a guarantee that they won't leave, right? But all an employer can do is create the conditions for them to stay. And I'm just making the point, and I really strongly believe that it has to be a personalized experience to get the maximum engagement you can, knowing that there are other factors playing into that person's life that are going to cause them to make a decision. Like I said, they're not necessarily going to retire from there. Lisa reminded us that the average tenure is less than 3 years. So employers need to do the best they can to have the highest engagement possible for the time frame that the people are going to be working there. And if we're ultimately going to give them the respect, they're going to feel a tighter connection, and that's only going to reap good things while they're there and also once they leave, because they'll be ambassadors for the company. And that's not a small thing, and we often don't think about that.
Yeah. Jason, I saw you raising your hand there for one second. No?
Yes. I mean, all I wanted to say is, hallelujah. Like, that is exactly the answer of what we need. We need personal, individualized, flexible policies, benefits, and approaches to employees, right? Nobody is the same. There's no consistent, or one size fits all, approach to solving for high engagement. It is knowing what's in it for that person and what they want out of it from their company. It's knowing your people, loving your people, understanding your people. And how do you get there? You get to there through feedback channels, different feedback channels, through things like stay interviews or touch point interviews. You do it through regular review sessions, individual development plans. You do it through obtaining data through census surveys or engagement surveys. There's no one way to get to the answer, but the answer is what Alicia just said is no one size fits all. You have to do the hard work to understand what your people want on an individual level, and then make sure that you, as an HR leader or your company, from an HR perspective, is able to make offerings that are flexible to those needs on individual bases. So I loved the setup, and I'm completely agree with that approach. Very passionate.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the thing that I was going to mention is going back to individual growth plans, which is something that we did 20 years ago, and people didn't love them back then, wanted to get rid of them, and let's have company-wide training or company-wide plans. And now we're going back to the individual growth plan and really designing those growth plans or employee experiences for the individual. And it's especially key when, the tenure is, average 1.5 to 3 years, but then also people are asking for promotions within 6 months of being in a role. And, how do you provide, especially in a smaller organization, in a larger organization, there's probably all sorts of ways that you can put people through paths, but in a smaller organization, obviously can't have everybody promoted all the time, and there's only so many roles. So we have to look at different streams of growth for folks, and different streams that aren't necessarily into a leadership role. So we started to develop these plans that are really focused on also how to grow laterally, or how to start to take a divergent career path. So you may start in finance and then discover partway through that you really have a talent or a love or a passion for marketing. So how do we take you through that path in the organization to retain you as long as we possibly can, and and really lean into your strengths and build that entirely new career path for you. But then also looking at things, again, that don't cost a lot of money. It's, budgets are thinner and getting thinner and thinner in the HR world. So we've looked at, reverse mentoring or dual mentoring. And that's really the wisdom and knowledge gained from that lifetime of experience that is shared with those that are newer to the workforce to really support that successful transition into the workforce. And then in concert, sharing ideas about technology and innovation and different ways of thinking, so that you start to have those meaningful connections across various levels within the organization. And those relationships start to build trust, which is something that we've really lost in the last couple of years. I believe Angela was talking a little bit about that. And so, really connecting people within all levels of the organization. And then, when you're connected to something that's bigger than yourself, you show up a little bit differently, possibilities start to open up, different people are seeing the talents right across the organization than just your direct leader. And that allows people to do their best work and, ultimately supports that engagement and retention.
I find it almost unbelievable that we are right in the middle of our conversation already. And I heard at least twice, one from Lisa, one from Alicia, the mention that, hey, this is not yet another HR thingy. So I do want to acknowledge that and park it for a few more minutes. And I just want to anticipate one of the most popular questions of these panels, like, is this recorded? Yes. So this is being recorded, and you can go back and check your notes or recommend it. You can find it either on our LinkedIn space or hackinghrlab.io. And I love the energy, and the hallelujahs on the there's no one size fits all. Yet I do want to be able to leave our audience with some method to the madness. So is there a backbone? Is there an outline? Are there some building blocks to employee engagement and retention that can be put into a practical mind map? And Alicia, I would really love to hear from you, and then everybody, please just chime in.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think it really starts with the company itself and who it wants to be, right? So, Karis was talking about, opportunity is going to look different if the company is smaller. And these are things that can be addressed at the recruiting level, right? It's not a mystery that if you're in a small company, the path and to advancement is going to look different than it's going to look at a larger company. And a lot of times that goes unsaid. One of the things I would always ask a potential hire is, what does success look like to you? Because sometimes the answer is something that we can't deliver. So you might as well find it out at the beginning. So I think it's really important as an employer to say, what is my employer value proposition anyway? What is it, right? So that everybody is on the same page with it, and we're communicating to our employees so that they know what is possible and what is not possible for them. It could be that a company has made the decision that they're not going to be the top payer in their industry, but you know what? They're going to use cutting edge technology, and it's going to be a really fun environment, right? So figure out what it is you're offering the people, because a lot of the disconnect happens when there is sort of a misalignment between people's expectations and needs and what the company is actually doing. And because there just isn't, a conversation happening. And we really can't afford for that conversation to not be happening. And I understand that companies, especially the leadership, they have a bias to do things that scale, right? You want to do things that scale. But we have to figure out ways to do more tailored things that can scale, right? They don't always have to cost money. Just because it's individualized does not mean it's going to be a hot mess or does that, right? It's harder, but we can do hard things. We could do hard things, right? And I think we should just really have this expectation that people are going to be here for however long they're going to be here. Let's just make it amazing, but let's just from the get-go understand what we are offering to our employees, and they can either like it or not. And that's okay. It's absolutely fine if they don't like it, because then they should look for another opportunity, and the company can be in authenticity with itself because it already decided what type of company it wanted to be. So I think a lot of this has to start with leadership, and then it trickles down, and we can have that really great two-way exchange with the employees at the time of hire, right? About what the experience is going to be. And then HR can help keep everybody honest, right? HR is not responsible for engagement. We measure it, try to create the conditions and work with people, but we can certainly hold people accountable over time to make sure that we continue to deliver on the promise of the type of engagement that we want to provide for the people who decide to give years of their career to the company.
Thank you. Lisa.
Alicia, I could not agree with you more. I listening to you talk about that. So we have this saying at Perceptyx that it is not our responsibility to make you or to continuously employ you, but to make you continuously employable, right? Like, we know your time here may only be 2 years if this isn't the place for you to grow your career or you get a greater opportunity, right? But while you're here, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you're employable and you get all the benefits to your own growth and development and everything possible, right? But I think it's also a people leader switch as well, because I've watched leaders over the course of a number of my organizations I've worked for, that when somebody chooses to move on for reasons that are really advantageous for them, there is a disconnect between the people leader and the person leaving. Like there's this expectation that they're supposed to stay, right? And I have this belief that, listen, if somebody makes the decision that this is not the right place for them anymore, hopefully we've told them what it's like to work here up front, as you mentioned, but we should help them have a delightful exit. Like, we should help them and encourage them and be an advocate for them to move on so they can go grow somewhere else, right? And curious, back to your point, again, people leaders, I keep going to the people in the business, have to help people visually see that a career trajectory is not a path anymore, right? There is not a designated path for every individual in an organization that says this is what your career should look like. My career started in sales, went to product, and is now in HR. That is not a traditional career path, right? Thank goodness, because I wouldn't be where I am. But we've got to help educate our leaders to be able to have those conversations, because again, we can set kind of the tone for listening and engaging engagement, but it's the people closest to the action who are having the most profound impacts on our people and their decisions. And in some instances, we haven't equipped those leaders to be able to have those types of conversations and to help people navigate and find that direction that they need to take. So I think there's lots of opportunity back to very individualized approaches, as Alicia mentioned, but we also have to generalize our learning for our leaders to help our leaders be better at navigating some of these nuances that have now entered into our workforce or have just become more prominent. They've probably always been there, but there's a heightened sensitivity around some of these conversations that we didn't see in the past.
And I just want to get a little bit more specific. Manoa, you had asked about building blocks for engagement. And I think it all comes down to, we as humans, we are always looking for our people. We're always looking for our tribe, right? That's part of what draws us in to these different places that we work and our neighborhoods and our families. We're looking for belonging. And so the 4 building blocks that I think of when I think of engagement are things that drive that, things that drive belonging. Because when people feel they belong, they engage. And so people feel they belong when they feel like they're themselves, when they can be their true selves. that may come with remote work, that may come with flexible work, that may come with the choice of how they perform their work. But they want to feel that they are autonomous and free as much as possible within the confines of your company, to feel like they can do that so they can belong. They want to feel like what they do matters, that they're making an impact on something, that they're connected to your purpose, to your values, that they are growing in their career as part of that as well. And that they might grow in their career at your company, and they might grow in your career at another company. But as long as your company is part of that growth, they will feel like they belong. I think people also want to be seen and feel cared about and appreciated. And that comes in the gaze of different rewards and recognition programs. And then people, to belong, also want to feel connected. We want to feel like we have relationships with people, that we're surrounded by people who care about us. And if you think of those as your 4 building blocks, then you can go back to everything that we've been talking about, right? Everything we've talked about in terms of how to make this individualized for each need. What Jason talked about with surveys and exit interviews, and really understand what people are looking for. So when we say impact here, what makes you feel like you have an impact? When we talk about connection, what makes you feel like you have a connection? And you can get down to some really specific strategies that work at your organization and in your culture and for your people, really thinking about those building blocks and how they each drive belonging.
I mean, everything has been everything's been so eloquently said. The only thing that I would add to that is really like the listening tours, which I find are so valuable for discovering all of the pieces that you need to pull together for the building blocks that Angela was just talking about, and really talking to your people. And it's easier, of course, for me to do because we're a smaller organization, so we can go around and actually speak to every single person in the organization multiple times during the year and really stay on top of what are those things that are starting to emerge that we need to address right away. But there's other ways of gathering that feedback. But it's really having that that ability to listen to what's happening at the sort of grassroots ground level of the organization, the people that are being impacted by the leaders who may or may not be leading well, that can tell you what's happening there, so that you can really get in there and address some of those issues right away.
And I was not about to cut you off again, Karen. So there you go. All I would add is you going back to the framework, and the panelists have all laid out good reasons and good aspects of the framework. But I think one of the things that often I see as a miss in organizations is that HR knows the framework, but managers don't know how to carry it out. And so communication is usually a huge impediment to success when it comes to engagement, because HR leaders and sometimes business leaders, they have the framework, they know what they want to do, they know the offerings, all the benefits offerings, all the employee offerings, all the development offerings, all the where we are in best in class when it comes to wages and stuff like that, and the physiological needs and safety needs of an organization. But how is that playbook executed? Right? Look at the football teams, right? They can have the best playbook in the world, but if the players don't know how to execute the playbook, then they're never going to get the ball into the end zone. So when it comes to an organization, I think leaders sometimes have the miss of making sure employees know of all those offerings, right? And making sure that they know of all the opportunities that are out there for career development, making sure that their managers know how to execute that. And if their managers don't, that they're really working with those managers on how to execute that framework for success. And then ultimately making sure that we're building tools such that employees can easily find these things out themselves as well in a self-sufficient environment that we're moving into through the systems of the organization. Don't hide all the benefits. Alicia mentioned about the employer value proposition. I've used that before. I love that term as well. If you have an employer value proposition, don't you want to make sure everybody knows of all that value that you're offering them? I mean, you want to make sure that they have access to all the things that you're offering as a company. And then last thing I just want to be agile. Again, going back to the point of individualism, whether it's cultural agility or other types of agility, making sure that the company is agile enough in these offerings so that way they can be customized to the individual. So again, whether it's a flexible work environment or going back to something like a benefits offering, give a floating holiday for a cultural reason. and let the employee choose for their own liking what cultural data they wish to observe to their own individual self. So it's a widespread offering that can be individualized. So again, allow your policies to be agile to an individual. Thank you.
It was so awesome listening to how each of you highlighted the importance of belonging in one way or another. And you reminded me, I recently saw this very, very short video, and it was Brené Brown saying that it was surprising that according to research, the opposite of belonging is fitting in. Is when you deem a part of yourself down, is when you maybe park a part of yourself outside of work. And I honestly don't see how fitting in and making it work contributes significantly to engagement and retention. But I do want to keep myself honest to my promise of talking a little bit about who does what when it comes to employee engagement and retention. And because Lisa, you were the first one to say it clearly that, hey, this is not just HR work. I would really invite you to lead us into this part of the conversation today.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go back off of what Alicia said earlier. It is the people team or HR team's responsibility to employ your listening strategy, whether that's, as Kiris is saying, having the benefit of being able to talk to people one-on-one in settings. Jason mentioned the episodic survey approach that a lot of organizations, quite frankly, still use, or if you're doing continuous listening, that is something that definitely the HR or people team builds the framework for and the infrastructure around to collect the data or the sentiments and feedback from employees, right? It is their responsibility then to get that information as quickly as possible into leaders' hands, because leaders are the ones that are closest to the action, right? They're the ones who are engaging with the people in the organization on a regular basis. They're having the conversations. They have the most intimate knowledge, hopefully should have the most intimate knowledge of the aspirations of the people that they are providing leadership to, what motivates them, et cetera. And so, when it comes to gathering it, definitely people team leaders need to have a greater responsibility for being the ones that have kind of the feet on the ground, helping not just give feedback, but really move to personalized action orientation, right? And I'm not talking about people leaders building action plans around how they're going to drive greater engagement. Like, I'm talking about personalized behavior change where we have great action orientation, because to the point that the panelists have made earlier, people all are motivated differently. They're inspired differently. They have different expectations. And so it really is the responsibility of those leaders. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say it's also the responsibility of every single employee in the organization, right? Like, it is not our jobs as leaders to be 100% responsible for people's engagement. We have to take our own responsibility for our own level of engagement. And if we are, as Heather or as Angela was saying earlier, we're one of those who have quit and stayed, that's our responsibility. Our leaders can't necessarily be the ones that are responsible for correcting that. So every single person in the organization has a role to play, depending upon who they are and what role they facilitate in the organization. But we have to be prescriptive in what we expect, and we have to enable both our people and our people leaders to be positioned to do the work, to have the conversations, to provide the opportunities, to create the personalization. Because again, as people are moving really, really fast and change is constant, we have people leaping into new roles and new opportunities that frankly haven't been positioned for success. So I think there's multiple levels of accountability and responsibility depending upon where you sit and what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Yeah, Kiris and then Alicia.
Yeah, so completely, agree with everything that Lisa just said. And we've operationalized that in our organization by making engagement a metric that the organization is measured on. It's not a people team measure as it always used to be. And it's something I advocated for heavily this year was, we cannot be solely responsible for engagement for the organization. So, it is everybody's responsibility. So how do we make sure that we're measuring it that way? And that way it's seen across the organization as important enough to then put in the effort and the work behind it.
That me?
Yes, please.
I'm always waiting for you to call the name. I've been trained to wait for your name to be called, to be orderly.
Alicia.
Well, I think that one thing that's important to put out there, and we said this at the beginning, that there isn't necessarily, a one-to-one tie between engagement and retention. And we need to just accept what's happening in the United States. So a lot of people talk about the Great Resignation and everybody's head exploded. But if you look at the data, for the past 10 years, the number of people who quit every month has been increasing. So on average, 3.7 million people quit their jobs each month. Okay? And it can be, tremendously different across industries. Sometimes you see really big jumps. I remember looking at the data, the finance and insurance industry, 1 month, it increased, the number of people who quit increased by 50%. You gotta say, what the hell happened there? So as much as HR and other folks who are responsible in companies for, for how what the workforce dynamics are, I think we have to realize that there are some limitations to the amount of retention that any employer can actually achieve, right? So you don't sort of, it's not the case that you shouldn't care about employee engagement and throw your hands up and say, well, that's just what it is. Like, that's not true. You want to do as much as you can. In some ways, it's almost better to think about the impact of employee engagement on productivity, because that also contributes to people's sense of contribution and impact. And those are things that affect their retention, but it's also, a business imperative. But as it relates to retention, I think we should cut ourselves some slack. If we see a huge increase in attrition, maybe you have to do something about that. But if it's flat, if it's tending down, it's not always because the organization did something wrong. This is where the zeitgeist is. People are moving around more often. Facts. And there are only so many things that an employer can do. So I'm not saying this absolves the organization of responsibility, but we can't look at the company as an island. It exists in the broader population, the national workforce, and employees are making different decisions about how they want to run their careers. Right. So just put that in the universe, because I know it can be really easy to get so focused on what's happening in your one company, but it's bigger than that. Bigger than that. And this has been an issue for years. This is not a new thing.
Well, and I think a few years ago, there was a popular sentiment that went around in HR circles that was, I don't engage you, you engage you. You're responsible for your own engagement. And while that's true, I think it complicated the issue and kind of made things messy. People can't be engaged if we haven't created an environment in which they can be. And so it's a shared responsibility. And I think Jason was starting to hit on some of this as well, that yes, you are responsible to be an engaged employee, but a manager is responsible for creating an environment in which that can happen. And HR is responsible for creating the framework in which that environment can happen. And so it's this shared responsibility between the three. Instead, we all tend to point fingers at each other. And well, that employee isn't engaged because they chose not to be engaged. Well, I couldn't create an engaging environment because HR didn't give me the tools. Well, I couldn't have created an engaging environment because it was your responsibility to be engaged. And instead, it's all of us that work together to create that environment and then to step through that door of engagement.
Jason.
Yeah, that's what I said. One thing, I I go back like to the human nature of this. Like, I do think like people really do want to spend a long time in a company. If they feel a sense of belonging, do they really want to leave? Right? If they feel that connection. And I think, like, again, I wish I had numbers to support it, and I'm going based on a feeling, and us HR people go sometimes too much based on data sometimes nowadays, and not enough based on feelings. But if you look at employers of choice, are people really leaving those companies if they really have that sense of belonging? The ones that are leaving, I think, are, again, if there's a company doing restructuring, if there's a certain individual where they don't feel like they belong. But again, I do think there's longer tenure when it comes to those employers of choice, and I do think that there's a human instinct to want to remain loyal to a company that they feel like they are belonging in, not a company that they feel like they fit into. So I do think that, I don't know if it's really human nature, but anymore. So I think maybe there's just an opportunity for employers to, again, execute more. And again, I think we're in a volatile market, more and more volatile, because there's different things happening, technology, ability for remote work. There's new AI coming into stuff. There's a lot more pressures that people are seeing that is more volatile, that's causing this distress and causing turnover that we're seeing. And I do think it'll get worse, correct. But I do think that ultimately down inside of human nature, it is just to remain. It is just, they want to stay at that same company if they feel like they have that connection, if they have that high level of engagement, if they do feel that sense of belonging. At those employers of choice, it's really getting towards that higher end of the Maslow's hierarchy of esteem, because they feel like they are being looked upon, they are recognized, and they're being looked upon as a level of importance, and where they really are fitting in, and with their sense of purpose is there to help that company. And then ultimately that self-actualization of how can they be the best version of themselves as a human, as a person, as a contributor to that company. And that's what we all strive to be, but you don't see that in companies, for the most part. And but those people that are reaching those levels, I don't think you see a high level of turnover either. So again, I think that the whole human factor of wanting to remain is something that's out there. I do think it's a miss, and I do think it's challenging because of the marketplace that we have, the volatility that we see nowadays.
Well, frustratingly, so we are about 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, if we speak very fast away from saying goodbye. And I would really love to give each of you, just a very short punchline type of opportunity. And this is the open topic question. Is there a particularly meaningful message to you personally that you want to leave with the audience? And for some reason, we just didn't get to cover it. I know that this topic should have its own series, not just one panel conversation. And what I will do, I will pass the mic around again in the interest of time. So something very, very short, very punchy, something that we never got to touch during the conversation, but you do want to leave it here. So, Keris.
Yeah, so there was actually a really interesting Wall Street Journal article published a few days ago. And the title was, "Why is everyone so unhappy at work right now? US employees are more dissatisfied than they were in the thick of the pandemic." And it just sort of begs the question of right now, like, even though we're giving salary increases, unlimited vacation policies, flexible working arrangements, excellence in leadership, transparency, all of the list goes on, people still aren't engaged at work, and they're angry and fed up and exhausted. And I really still hope that we're able to turn this around and to have, an impact on people. And I'm certainly not giving up, but it also illustrates the really almost nearing impossible job that we all have in HR.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Alicia, your punchline.
Well, I would say one of the things that's important to explore is how some of these things differ based on race and gender. because we know that women and people of color are higher flight risks, even when they have the same engagement levels as their counterparts, right?
you.
So we need to go a little bit deeper and figure out, and this is back to that whole individualization, right? But we need to figure out what is happening in certain populations, because it is not a monolith. And I think not only does it vary by gender and race, data says it does, but for individual companies, they need to figure out what their situation is. So I would suggest that people take a cohort-based approach to trying to understand what's happening with both employee engagement and with retention.
Thank you so very much. Angela.
Engagement, belonging, building trust, these things don't have to cost anything, but they multiply everything.
Thank you. Lisa, can we have you with us for 20 seconds for your punchline?
Yeah, listen, I think we've talked a lot about a lot of different things. If we are actively seeking and more importantly, responding to the things that our employees are telling us as organizations, we can really gain critical insights into what the needs and behaviors are, and we can capture what those continuous improvement ideas are. And I think at the end of this, leaders will be able to be making more informed decisions that create stronger relationships with their people and ultimately create a culture of trust, transparency, and engagement. And it's as simple as listening and acting.
Thank you. And thank you so much for staying with us. And I saw your text that you have to drop. Thank you. Jason.
Yeah, all I would add is, we didn't mention it that I remember, is something like I'm doing today, doing give back, mentoring, finding mentees, being a mentor to someone. Again, it doesn't have to be in the workplace, it could be outside the workplace. But again, knowing someone on a level that is genuine. And what I mean by that is, knowing your people at work, your relationships outside of work, be genuine and not just live by the golden rule of how to treat others, but genuinely have an interest in them, getting to know them, understanding what makes them tick, okay? And loving, and as I like to say, loving your people, right? And that will help you break down these barriers to understand what individually they need and want out of a company or want out of their relationships that they have in life, which optimally will cause their happiness.
Thank you so very much, everyone. And Caris, Alicia, Angela, Jason, and Lisa, it was amazing to be so close to this conversation. Extra thank you for the extra generosity of time and insights. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time and the curiosity to be here, either live or later on the recording. And I'm looking forward to welcoming you tomorrow for our to wrap up of the November series conversations. And also huge thanks to Jessa and Enrique for creating the opportunity for these conversations to happen. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and the very short rest of the month. I will see everybody tomorrow. Thank you.